It's so infuriating. The only saving grace, Keith, is that Tamara Lich maintains her good attitude. I mean, I saw her perform with her husband some great musical numbers at Rebel News Live a few months ago in Calgary. And I know she had that big concert in Niagara on the Lake about a month ago. And she's happy, normal, positive, happy warrior. I think it's sort of a miracle that she herself has not become soured and jaded by this. I think that's how she's going to win, by being positive while these angry government prosecutors flail about trying to hurt her. I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching, but I think that the only reason I would call this a success so far is because of Tamara Lich's own demeanor.
Well, there's three things I'd say on that, Ezra. One is, ask yourself, why is it? So remember, I was on the ground. The convoy arrived on a Friday, the end of January, and then I arrived on the Wednesday and was there till the end with Tamara and others, trying to ensure that it was peaceful and lawful. But why is it on the Thursday, almost 3 weeks later, before the police did the mass beating of lawful protesting Canadians and arrests that started on the Friday and into the Saturday, why is it on the Thursday that they arrested Chris Barber about 4 o'clock and then Tamara Lich at about 7 o'clock? It was because, in my view, that they were trying to send a message. Like, why just arrest those two, right? Mm-hmm. They were trying to scare the other protesters into leaving. Why is this trial going on for a year?
Yeah.
They're trying to scare other Canadians from protesting and challenging government. There was symbolism.
Yes.
Their decision to arrest the two when they did was a symbolic step.
Yeah.
The decision to run the trial is symbolic.
Yeah.
Now, but let me I have to give some color and detail to what they've done to Tamara and Chris, but largely Tamara. Is you talk about the process being the punishment. And yes, Tamara puts on a brave face, but she's suffering. She can't work. Mm-hmm. She can't get a job.
Right.
How can you go and try and get a job and say, oh, I might have to go off to Ottawa again for 3 more weeks?
That's right. Yeah.
She pays just the toll alone of her and Dwayne, her husband, driving across the country the number of times they have, miling out their pickup truck, trying to find people.
They drive all the way to Ottawa, eh?
Yeah. And sometimes they're so eager to get home. The last 2 times they drove straight through, did it in 35 hours, team driving. Didn't get a hotel, nothing.
You know what?
But
I feel like crowdfunding some flights for them, so maybe they want to have their car in Ottawa. Maybe that's why. But
well, and it's expensive for them to stay and eat and so on. Now, and on top of that, though, remember that she was in jail for 49 days. And I don't know how it came up. Her and I were talking the other day, and I don't know what we were talking about, but it caused her to tell me about the conditions she was in for a number of those days.
Right.
She was in a cell for, I think it was a total of 7 days at different points, where there wasn't even a bunk. There wasn't a mattress. It was a concrete slab with cold air coming in. She had nothing.
Right. Yeah.
They didn't have to do
in her
that.
book. Yeah. I mean, I learned a lot of terrifying things about her time in jail.
Her book's amazing.
You know, I'm so glad that she wrote that. And as you know, we had the lawyer go through it before we published it because we didn't want that insane prosecutor to try and prosecute her for the book for contempt of court. It's a great book. I thought I knew the story, but there's so many details, including the abuse she took from the media. Normally, you have a Métis woman leading a righteous civil liberties protest. She's going to be, the hero of the year. She's going to be honorary professor. She's going to win every award. But they even tried to deny her Indigenous heritage because they were trying to destroy. And by they, I mean the regime media. You're so right. And it reminds me of Trudeau's first reaction to the trucker convoy. He was delighted by it. He thought, oh, good. This is our January 6th Donald Trump style insurrection. We're going to paint them as Trump style racist, I don't know, he threw in what xenophobes and homophobes. Like it was just such a bizarre thing. And he would have gotten away with it too if he could have controlled the narrative. But it was very proud. Rebel News really deployed into the streets. We, along with other independent journalists too, really was the independent journalists, whether it was Rupa Subramanya or I think True North had someone on the ground. Of course, Rebel News just flooded the zone. He wanted to have that January 6th moment. And he wanted
we knew that.
He wanted to throw them all in jail.
Look at how, and that was, we were completely, when I arrived there, we were so alive to that. Not just me, so many of the protesters and the truckers and those who were volunteering to try and keep it orderly. That's why when I remember when someone came into one of the operations centers and said, we need to take some of these donations and go down and buy, 500 snow shovels. Approved. So off they went to buy all these snow shovels, cleaned out every Walmart, Home Depot, Canadian Tire. Why? Because the truckers were going to make the sidewalks the cleanest they've ever been in the history of Ottawa. Right. There was garbage bags everywhere. We had a garbage collection system. It was like, what are all of the things the Prime Minister's going to want these guys to do to vilify them? And they were going to do the opposite. Hence this brilliant idea that some came up with for the bouncy castles and so on. Right. But, and I just want to circle back to Tamara for one thing, because a lot of people don't realize what I'm about to say. And it's very important that they do, which is she is still under her bail conditions.
Right.
She cannot use social media. And in our world today, depriving someone of being able to utilize social media is actually a very serious punishment.
It's like 50 years ago saying to someone, you can't use a telephone.
Yeah. And you can't read a newspaper. You can't use a telephone, and you can't read a newspaper or listen to the radio news, right? Because that's what social media has become. All three of those. Right. She has people on her non-contact list, some of which we're still not even sure who they are, what they look like. It was just random people. So she has to be careful wherever she goes that one of these people don't happen to come up and say, hey, can I have a picture with you? She doesn't realize who's there, and then bam, she's off to jail again. Yeah. Her conditions are such that she's enduring a sentence right now.
Right.
And this is remarkable. So the fact that she's being deprived of seeking employment, the fact that she's incurring all these expenses, the fact that she can't use social media, these are all punishments. And you mentioned the process is the punishment for sure. It's not just the courts. It's just not the risk of the legal fees. It's really, unfortunately, feels so badly like the government, the ruling Liberals, are trying to scare other Canadians from exercising their constitutional rights and challenging government decisions.
You know what? A senior lawyer told me very early in the game when we were talking about what a disaster these airport quarantine hotels were. Remember, you had to stay in an airport hotel for thousands of dollars for 3 days upon returning to the country. And I thought, this can't possibly be, like, it's so absurdly abusive and punitive and stupid. And the senior lawyer said, yeah, that's the point, is so that each person who goes through with it tells 100 people how awful it was, to scare those 100 from traveling, that it was abusive on purpose. And that's exactly what they're doing to Tamara. And I'd like to remind people, if they want to help Tamara, I can think of 3 ways to do it. One is to help with the legal defense. As you know, the Democracy Fund is crowdfunding the legal defense. And I don't want to tell you how much money we've spent so far, but it is 6 figures, obviously. And you can do that at helptamara.com. Just go to helptamara.com. And by the way, you'll get a charitable tax receipt, because that's a civil liberties court case that's covered by that charity. And if you want to help on the Rebel News side, as you know, we've had a reporter there every single day, Robert Krajcik. You can help him at tamaratrial.com. We've got a few websites. And if you haven't read Tamara's book, she gets a royalty from those books. So if you want to help Tamara personally, I would encourage you to get a book. I think it's an excellent book. I read it. I thought, oh, I know everything here. I don't need to read this book. I read the book, and not only did I really like, it was a fun, I don't know if fun is the right word. It was an interesting read, but I learned things about her that I didn't know. And I thought I knew a lot about her. I think I doubled how much I knew about her by reading the book. So those are 3 things you can do if you want to help the fight back. It's incredible to me that this is going to be continuing into the spring. I'm glad to be a small part of the large team of Canadians, including you, Keith, including her excellent lawyer in Ottawa, Lawrence Greenspan, who I have really grown to like and admire. And by the way, I should say, Keith, and maybe you have a thought on this, I think that the other journalists who are in the court on a daily basis, there's a CBC journalist there every day, and there's CP, there's a few other news agencies covering it every day. I think they've been won over by Lawrence Greenspan. Like, there's no way they're going to be pro Tamara Lich journalists. But I think Lawrence Greenspan, his demeanor, his tone, his command of the law, his sense of humor, he just feels like a great lawyer, and a bit of a, some lawyers are naturally teachers, I think. And he's a great communicator. I think that Lawrence Greenspan is excellent and is sort of, I'm not going to say winning the CBC over, because that's impossible. But the reporters there treat him with respect, and they listen to what he says because he's so obviously competent. That made me feel really good to see that with my own eyes when I was there. Last word to you. How are you feeling about the trial so far? I understand there's a chance you may be called as a witness yourself, so you want to be very careful about what you say here. But is there anything you feel comfortable saying about the trial so far? I mean, you've already given us some thoughts, but is there something?
Yeah, well, I would say that I think what I believe might have happened here, because I have noticed a softening from the legacy media and a more of a balanced approach in some of their reporting, not all, it's hit and miss, is that I think it's not only the advocacy and the tremendous skill that Lawrence Greenspan and his team, as well as Diane Magus, Mr. Barber's lawyer, have demonstrated as criminal lawyers. It's also the poor quality of the evidence that has been put forward and the truth that's come out through that. But I also think that by sitting in the room and watching Tamara and seeing her outside of the courtroom, and they've really gotten to know who she is as a true, incredibly representative, good Canadian. And let me just close with one little vignette. Mm-hmm. It was in the first week of trial, and you'll know because the Rebel News does this as well, as Tamara and her husband and Mr. Greenspan and others, the legal team, are getting close to in the morning as they're walking to the courthouse, and they come around the corner and all the cameras come on. And as she's walking, there was one morning where, and all the report you don't see is all the reporters and cameramen with their cameras, they're running backwards, right? And they usually have someone with a hand on them so they don't trip. Right. Well, a bunch of the reporters, Global and others, I think, there was a fellow, might have looked like a homeless guy, with his bike, and they tripped over his bike, knocked his bike over, knocked and broke the cigarette out that was in the guy's hand. Tamara immediately spotted this, zigged over herself, picked up his bike, and checked to see if he was okay. Dwayne, her husband, hung back and gave the guy a smoke. Like, that was Tamara right there. Right. She saw a problem. She realized she had something to do with it, because if she had not been walking, even though it was the reporters being clumsy and not being concerned about who was around them, she took ownership for it. She decided what she needed to do, and she immediately acted to make it right. And the reporters would have all saw that. Yeah. And they probably would have thought of every other time that's happened, because it will happen many times as people are walking backwards, trying to stay in focus with their camera in the shot. They probably don't remember a single time, whether they were following a politician or someone else of profile, and that person stopped immediately and felt that helping that person out who had been harmed was the most important thing they could do at that moment. Yeah. So that's Tamara Lich right there.
That's a great vignette, and I appreciate you sharing that.